Good morning and welcome to HRTV. Today I have the pleasure to interview Dr. Patti Phillips, the President and CEO of the ROI Institute, a globally significant learning and development firm. So a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Now, what I find interesting to start off with is you didn't begin your career, or certainly not your academic career, leading, obviously towards a career, a company in learning and development. You actually studied international development and management. Can you tell us a bit about the journey that actually led you towards founding the ROI Institute?
Oh, you bet. So, no, I did not begin in learning and development. In fact, the process that we built our company on is a methodology that my husband developed back in the 1970s when he was an engineer at a company called Lockheed. So over the years, as he went through corporate, he was applying the process, he wrote books and really put the concept of ROI and learning and development and HR on the map. I got involved a little over 20 years ago. I had a corporate career. One of my last positions in the corporate realm was head of market planning and research. So my team was made up of planners and researchers and economists. My peer was a corporate economist. And then I left and got involved with my husband's business. He started the business 25 years ago. I got involved with him, with the business. And then I got involved with him. He became my husband. But never thought about working in this learning and development and HR space. In fact, when I was in corporate, learning and development and HR, they were more about policy and activity and engaging with them the way they wanted you to engage with them. So coming from the business side of the organization and looking at L&D and HR, it was nothing but negative. It was like, they're requiring us to do things that make no sense to the business. So when I got involved with the methodology that my husband developed and started doing my own research and applying it with my own clients, I realized, there's certainly something to the methodology, but more importantly, organizations can demonstrate value that's meaningful to the business, not just to them. So I began working in the business over 20 years ago. We started again in learning development and HR, and then over the years, through my research in international development, we've actually applied the methodology well beyond the HR realm. We work with nonprofits, non-governmental organizations. We apply it to humanitarian programs. But more than that, our business has expanded to be more than just measurement and evaluation. We really look at analytics from a bigger picture.
Yeah, and we'll come on to analytics, but I want to drag you back a little bit because it's, we've got a gap there. I understand the ROI methodology. Return on investment is part of every executive's sort of playbook. But what was that watershed moment where you said, I'm going to take this ROI methodology, coming from a corporate side, and I'm going to apply this to this field that you had nothing but potentially contempt for before,
yeah.
the learning and development field. What was that watershed moment that said, right, I'm going to apply this to learning and development?
Yeah, the watershed moment was that you can actually do it, because the conversation was not taking place when I was in corporate. There was no conversation about impact and ROI and connecting to the business. And then when I got involved with the methodology, the process that we use is good research methodology. You're really looking at cost-benefit analysis, but you're building, along with that, you are building research and data that tell a complete story of what happens when people get involved in programs and projects and initiatives. So I looked at this process, this methodology, and I thought, God, this just is nothing but logical to do this. And why not put it in the hands of learning and development professionals and HR professionals, because what they do is so important. It's just no one really at the time thought about connecting it to the business. Now you assume it's connected to the business, but there was no demonstrable evidence that it was. There was nothing that really made that connection, and that's what senior executives want to know. And it's not a hard question, and it's not an unfair question. It's just a question. And so when we work with L&D, when we work with HR, it is just a logical sequence of events that occurs as you roll out new initiatives to connect them to the business, because that's why you roll them out. We don't put HR initiatives in place or learning development programs in place because we can. We do it because we should, and that should is the business.
I understand the should, and I love the concept of return on investment. I can see how engaging it is to senior executives, hiring you, sort of bringing in your services into their own companies. But the question I have for you is return on investment. It's very clear when we're talking about a new piece of machinery, or it's very clear when we're talking about, perhaps a new treasury system. You can very easily measure that return on investment. Yeah. But when you're talking about learning and development, it's very hard to, or for me, conceptually, it's very hard to map tangible financial returns specifically related to learning and development when they're in the mire of perhaps it was the new marketing plan that made the impact, or perhaps it was because of change in market conditions. Can you genuinely separate that, or is this very good marketing on behalf of the ROI Institute that helps you to have been so successful?
Yeah, no, you can do it. It's good research methodology. So the question is asked, how do you show ROI on leadership development, or how do you show ROI on an analytics project for that matter? And it's not that you're showing leadership development on a learning and development initiative or a recruiting strategy. You're showing the ROI on the consequence of those things. So step one, you have the activity, the program, whatever the initiative is, intervention. And then you treat it as an intervention. What we do too much of the time is treat it as an activity. So you treat it as an intervention, and when you can, you treat it in such a way that you have one group involved and one group not involved. It's classic experimental design. And in today's era of analytics and agility, experimentation is happening. It's a big deal. So you do your A/B testing. It's classic technique.
Forgive me for both myself and potentially others viewing. What do you mean by treating it as an intervention?
An intervention is like, we are purposely putting this program in place because we want to move the needle on these measures. It's an intervention. What happens in learning development and HR routinely is that we treat them as activity. It's like testing pasta. It's like we're putting all these things in place, and we go to a conference and we see all these cool things happening, and let's throw it up against the cabinet door, see what sticks. And that is crazy playing. So you treat it as a purposeful intervention. That doesn't mean every single thing is treated that way, because some things you just want to do. Well, if that's the case, don't try to connect it to the business. But if it's big, expensive, strategic, if it's tied to operational goals, the organization, treat it as an intervention. You are intervening through this process or this program with the intent of moving the measures that matter, of improving those measures. Now, in doing so, let's set up an experiment. Let's look at how this intervention works with this group and compare the outcomes of that group to those who are not involved. Now, some people will say, well, that's heresy. We can't be experimenting with people. Well, first, you're not experimenting with people. You're experimenting with programs. People are involved. The other point is, again, because we're in this era of analytics and we want to be agile organizations, you've got to be able to play. You've got to be able to go in there, test it. Is it working? If it's not, let's pivot. So experimentation is coming on pretty big. Over the 25 years we've been doing this, we've used experimental design as the tool to demonstrate impact due to a program about 35% of the time. There are other techniques that you can use. We can use trendline analysis. We can use our analytics. I mean, today it's much easier to try to dissect what's really happening because of the data, the amount of data we have in the technology. But sometimes you just have to go ask people. So, worst case, do a survey and ask people what caused the improvement and how much of that is due to the program.
Absolutely. Now you've mentioned a couple of times analytics, and that's what I want to be a big focus of this. You've come all the way here to Dubai from Alabama, and unfortunately I understand that's not just for this conversation and to meet me, but actually you've conducted some very interesting research on analytics.
Right.
Are you prepared to give us a bit of a scoop as to what that was all about and what the aims were, and perhaps what some of the findings have been?
You bet. Yep. So we did do some research. We actually, in part, replicated some work that we do in the U.S. For the past 3 years, we've partnered with a group in the U.S. Institute for Corporate Productivity, I4CP, to conduct research to kind of monitor the state of human capital analytics across organizations in the U.S. So for this conference, we decided, let's do it within the Middle East. So we took some of the questions that we used in the States study, and then we developed some other questions based on conversation with the project team. And we shot it out to our colleagues in the Middle East. We had about 450 responses back, so we were happy with that. And the findings are interesting. So I'll give you, quick heads up, but they're being revealed tomorrow, right? So
okay.
can't give you the whole story, but they're being revealed. But what we have found, there's investment going on. About 57% of our respondents tell us that they either dedicate resources to analytics or they plan to dedicate resources specifically to analytics sometimes in the future. So we did find that, and that's good news. The other thing that we found is, given the investment that they're making in analytics. About 20% of it right now is dedicated to technology, but that is expected to increase. So they're there, they're starting. Most of the organizations are in infancy stage, but there are some who have matured. They're actually doing some pretty robust analytics. But we're still growing. We're still in infancy stage. But they've got resources and they have plans to commit more, and that's a good sign.
Absolutely. Well, yesterday was analytics was a very big part of the conference, and and some of the technology that's being applied is frankly scary, artificial intelligence, but some of the results we can see from it are truly amazing. So I imagine that number 57% hopefully will increase. But the investment in technology is one part. But if you were to support these organizations in actually making a meaningful difference to their business through analytics, what does that mean? Is it just about improving their reporting, or do they have to go through a more significant change than that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Toby, because a lot of people think, let's get the technology and all our woes will be solved, and that's not true. It's much more than that. Technology is an enabler, for sure. But what we have to have is a technology that can connect the dots between learning data, HR data, and business data. The big question is, are our investments in our people paying off? Well, to understand that, we have to have access to the business data. So how do we do that? Let technology do it for us. Let technology pull the thread through from learning to HR to business, because in the end, our investment in people is about the business. It's not because we can, it's because we should. So let's leverage the technology to pull the thread through all the data silos. And then the other piece of it is, we've got to have a culture that enables the team to leverage the data. That's the tough part. It's got to be a culture of trust, a culture of transparency, and a culture that wants to truly be an agile organization. We talk agility. I4CP research is all about agility and collaboration, but the culture has to support it, otherwise we can't. I was mentioned to you earlier, I facilitated a 2-day workshop pre-conference to this conference, and in the group, they're there, people are asking to demonstrate the impact and the return on investment of their HR initiatives. Yet they tell me, well, we can't get to the business data. Well, how can you ask your people to demonstrate value for money if you're not letting them at least see the measures? So when I look at all the technology out there, there's a technology that exists, and maybe it's blockchain, that can connect the dots. It doesn't mean HR is going to get into the business data, and it doesn't mean the business people are going to get into the HR data, but we need to see it. It needs to be connected. So you need technology that pulls the thread through, and you need a culture that supports their people in leveraging the data.
Where does that resistance come from? Why do you think businesses are reluctant to share business data? Effectively, we're probably talking about sales figures or cost increases of production or whatever it might be. Why do you think organizations are resistant to share that data with HR, whereas they almost certainly would, without thinking about it, share that data to finance?
That's right. I think it has to do with, and there's a variety of reasons, but I think part of it has to do with they're not sure what HR is going to do with the data. And they have to protect, right? You have to protect where you are, and you don't want certain things to get out. You don't want certain things to get in the press. So I think part of it is just trust. How are you going to use the data? It's just like HR is a little protective of their data too. They're not going to just hand that off either. You've got to protect your people. So much of it is trust. Trust in people are going to make the right decisions, but also trust in the capability. There is a lost art, and that lost art is critical thinking. That is a skill we have lost, and sometimes we make crazy decisions about use of data and what we do with data because we just haven't thought through. Part of that is because there's so much coming at us. I think technology is brilliant. I love technology, but technology is crazy making. Technology is coming at us at warp speed, and it's the shiny object is always in our face. And so sometimes when you have that much happening, your lines are blurred and your thinking's not quite right. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think we have a little trust problem on both sides of the fence. It's part of it. Now there's other things going on, but I think that's part of it.
The understanding that the technology and the AI is there to augment our humanity rather than replace it.
Yeah, right. That's brilliant. Yeah.
So this is AI, analytics, AI. It's just one piece of what is likely to drive a part of the change in HR. Now, in the Middle East, we have seen over the last decade a very significant evolution of HR from a predominantly administrative function in many organizations to something that is a more strategic function. Now, in the US, this has been the case for somewhat longer. So could you explain to us perhaps, what are the major changes you've seen in the last decade in terms of the way HR is thought of in the US, and what you predict are the most significant changes that will happen to the HR function in the future?
Yeah, HR is beginning to be viewed as a true business partner. The HR business partner is an important part of ensuring that investment in people drive business. And so that HR, there's a lot of conversation now about the HR business partner. And how do we enable the HR business partner to leverage the data generated through the analytics? So HR business partner is the key. That is a critical role, and a lot of research is going on around how do we enable HR business partner, and how can the HR business partner really use the data we're generating from the analytics piece. So we are seeing that connection between HR and the business come together. There are still gaps in it. We are thinking sometimes it's not quite right. If we look at what we're reporting to the business in terms of dashboards and scorecards, Tableau generates beautiful output, but if it's not meaningful to the people using the data, it's just beautiful output, right? So if we have someone, for example, I had someone come to me and he developed 7 different dashboards with all their analytics, and they were beautiful. There was one on leadership, and there was one on diversity inclusion, and there's one on talent acquisition. I mean, all these beautiful dashboards. On those dashboards, there was not one target to which to compare the output. There were no dollar signs on it. So if you can reduce turnover, turnover is not a hard one to convert to money. If you can reduce turnover, show what it saved in terms of money. Money's compelling. The other thing that was missing from those dashboards is indicators important to the business, so business measures. It was all the people data, but there was nothing on there about the business measures that the organization is targeting. It doesn't mean that the dashboard has to communicate that we did these things, therefore this is what happened to the business. You're not looking necessarily at cause and effect, but you need to communicate to senior leadership that we have an eye on our people and we have an eye on our business. And so until we can really, I mean, even in the States, as much progress as we have made, until we can really communicate in a meaningful way that is logical and compelling, incredible, we're going to struggle just a little bit. Now, but again, we're making great headway, so it's good news. Good things are happening.
That's good. And I suppose my final question, you focus very much there on the future of the role in HR being about how much we can improve our reporting, how much we can improve our analytics in the context of business partnering. Now that to me is a slight misnomer, because when we talk about business reporting, we generally meet our line managers perhaps once a month to take them through their results.
Yeah.
Now the role of the HR executive, from what I understand, is changing because a lot of the basic administrative functions will be replaced by digital technology. For example, if you're renewing your visa or you're changing your address, this will all now be done via a digital interface. In the past, your business partner was there, and when you were changing your visa or updating your driving license details or whatever it might be, you'd have a conversation with your HR person, and they were relevant in your daily or weekly life. So if this is changing and HR is moving to a reporting and analytics function, how can HR stay relevant and a genuine business partner to the staff around them?
They've got to have the conversation. You can't leave it up to the digitization of the data and hope people, one, are looking at it. Number one, just because it's there doesn't mean they're looking at it, right? You can't just leave it up to that and hope they're looking at it and hope they understand it. So I don't think you're going to lose the conversation. I think it's going to be a different conversation than it is today.
Wonderful. Dr. Phillips, thank you ever so much for your time and joining us on HRTV.
Thanks,
and have a wonderful rest of your time in Dubai.
Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.